Hello, hi, I am Dia Sofia and I will be presenting about equity and trust for our group assignment presentation. And our topic will be equity looks to the intention rather than the form. So moving on to the next slide, our group member consists of Lau Klian, Elix Noun and also myself, which is Dia Sofia Johor. So moving on to the next slide. For the introduction, I will be presenting about the purpose of equity. So equity is the remedy of rigidity of common law, which is dependent on precedent and formal procedures, and it does not offer relief where rigid norms resulted in hardship. So for the second point is equity is established to rectify legal inadequacies by moderating the strictness of law with the principle of conscience, fairness, and good faith. So that is the second point. So for the third one is equity is also a corrective kind of justice that surpasses the rigidity of basic legal principles by adapting them to the specifics of individual circumstances. So that is the purpose of equity. So moving on to the next slide, which is the historical development. So there are four definitions for the equity. So for the first one, based on Aristotle, he defined equity as corrective justice, which is also known as epika. Correct me if I am wrong for the pronunciation. So for the next one, where Thomas Hobbes defined equity as providing rationale in instances where written law is either silent or insufficient. So for the next one, whereas according to Saint Germain, he regarded equity as the moderation of strict law. And for the last one is the Blackstone, where he defines equity as the spirit of law. So moving on to the next slide, which is the equity in Malaysian context. In Malaysian context, Wan Arfa Hamzah stated that equity aims to avert injustice by ensuring parties that are unjustly constrained by drafting faults or technicalities that misrepresent their true agreement. Malaysia has also adopted the English common law and equitable principles governed by Section 3 of the Civil Act 1956, which stated that the English law shall be applicable when appropriate to the local conditions. So moving on to the next one, which is the maxims of equity. This and the next slide will be talking about the 12 maxims of equity that serve as a foundational principle that guide equitable jurisprudence. And they are they do equity to get equity, no wrong without a remedy, treat as done what ought to be done, equity is equality, equity follows the law, and also clean hands doctrine. So for the next 6 are delay defeats equity, where equity is equal, law prevails. The next one is first in time prevails. The next one is intention over form, fulfill obligations, and also equity acts in personam. So these are the slides that I have presented, and I will be passing the presentation to my classmate. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.
Principle of the maxim overview. By this slide, we have 3 important points. The first is equity prioritize intention over form. Equity look at the true intention of the party, not just the words in the document. If there is a conflict, intention is more important than form. For the second point is ensure substance over technicality. Equity focus on the real deal, not small drafting error. The substance of the agreement matters more than technical mistake. For the point number 3 is basis for rectification remedy. This principle is the basis for rectification. Court can correct document with mistake so that they reflect the parties' true agreement. Substance over form. The first point is true bargain more than wording. Equity cares more about the real bargain. than the exact words. The court looked at the true intention, not drafting errors. For the second point is Civil Law Act 1956. Section 3, subsection 1 of the Civil Law Act 1956 allows Malaysian court to apply English equity. This let court focus on intention over strict wording. For the point number 3 is Bostate Trading against Arab Malaysian Bank 1995. In this case, the Federal Court confirmed that the real intention is more important than formal wording. It shows equity values substance over form. Protection against mistakes. The first point is rectification, correct drafting errors. Rectifications allow the court to fix mistakes in a written contract so it matches the real agreement between the parties. For the second point is Specific Relief Act 1950, Section 31 to 35. In Malaysia, this remedy comes from the Specific Relief Act 1950, Section 31 to 35. It let court correct document affected by fraud or mistake. For the point number 3 is Kardok Bros against Hans Persuasive. In this English case, rectification was used to fix an error in a land deed. It guides Malaysian by showing equity, prevent unfairness from drafting mistakes. Requirement of clear intention. The first point is strong evidence needed. Rectification needs strong proof of the parties' real intention like draft or letter, not just verbal claim. For the second point is Contract Act 1950, Section 10 and Section 30. Section 10 require real consent and Section 30 says uncertain agreement cannot be enforced. This support the need for clear intention. For the point number 3 is the case Tan Sri Ku Tek Puat against Plenitude Holdings 1994. In this case, the court said rectification is only allowed if there is clear evidence of a shared intention. Without proof, it cannot be granted. Conscience and fairness. The first point is prevent opportunistic conduct. Equity stops parties from taking advantage of mistakes in a contract. For the second point is priorities justice over technical fault. Justice comes first. Technical errors should not cause unfair result. For the point number 3 is equity as conscience of law. Equity is the conscience of the law. It ensures decisions are not only legal but also fair. Limits of the maxim. The first point is statutory compliance required. Equity cannot go against written law. Statutes must always be followed. For the second point is Stamp Act 1949 or NLC, National Land Court 1965. Unstamped document cannot be enforced and land dealings must be registered. Equity cannot bypass these legal rules. For number 3 is equity supplements, not override statute. Equity support the law but never replace it. It works only within legal limits. Effect of different situation. For the point number 1 is no form rectification not possible. No document, no rectifications. For example, the case Sun Life Assurance against Jervis 1944. For the point number 2 is partial form possible with evidence. If a document is incomplete or has mistakes, rectification is possible with strong proof. For example, the cases Jocelyn against Nissan 1917 and Bostate Trading 1995. For the point number 3, invalid form, statute override. If a document is invalid under law, like unstamped or unregistered, rectification cannot override the statute. For the last point is conscience guides within law. Equity is guided by fairness, but always within the limits of the law. Equity can correct documents, but only if the form is valid. It will never override statutory law. That's all about my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, hello. I'm Lau Yuk Lian. Now it's my turn to present the rest of the PPT. Okay, we have one scenario. For example, Ali promises his sister, if you don't get married, I will give you a big house. But when the agreement was written down, it's mistakenly write a big house for you. There are some main issues here. Firstly, is it possible for Ali's sister to request the court to amend the writing agreement, which incorrectly states a big horse instead of a big house? Secondly, will strong evidence like witnesses or letters showing Ali's real intentions affect the court's decision, especially since Ali's son refuses to honor it? Finally, the condition not to marry is unclear because there is no time limit. Does this mean until she is 80 or 100 or for her whole life? The law says that if a written contract has a mistake, the court can fix it. This is under the Specific Relief Act 1950, Section 31 to 35. The idea is simple. Equity looks to the intention, not the form. In other words, what matters is what the parties really meant, not just the exact words written down. The Civil Law Act 1956 also allows Malaysian courts to use English equity principles when needed. Normally, the Evidence Act 1950 says you cannot use oral evidence to change a written contract, but in rectification cases, the court can accept outside proof like draft, letter, or witnesses to show the true intention. So, in short, the law makes sure that document reflects the real agreement, not just errors in wording. For the case law, first in Jocelyn and Nissan's 1970, the court said there must be a clear and continuing intention between the parties before a document can be corrected. Second, in Bosti Trading and Arab Malaysian Merchant Bank 1995, the Malaysian court stressed that equity only steps in when fairness and caution require it. And third, in Gunting and Lin 1831, the court held that uncertain or vague promises cannot be enforced because the meaning is too unclear. For application, first let's talk about the roots. The maxim comes from the English Court of Chancery. It was used to soften strict common law by focusing on the parties' real intention. In Malaysia, this idea is recognized under the Civil Law Act 1956. Next, we will discuss the criteria for rectification. The court looks for three things. One requirement is that both parties had the same intention before signing. Secondly, the written document did not align with that intention due to an error. And three, there must be strong evidence like draft, letters, or witness statements to prove the true argument. I now understand that difference between mistake if the parties had a genuine agreement but the wording was incorrect. Rectification may be necessary, such as writing horse instead of house. But if there was never any true agreement, then rectification is not possible. The only option then is to cancel the contract. Finally, the law came into play. The Specific Relief Act 1950 gives courts the power to correct mistakes caused by fraud or error, and while the Evidence Act 1950 normally blocks oral evidence against a written contract, rectification is an exception. Courts can consider outside proof to determine the real intention. So overall, rectification is there to make sure document reflects the true agreement, not typing or wording errors. For conclusions, our team believes that the principal equity looks to the intention rather than the form is very important. It helps courts focus on the true intention of the parties, not just the rigid words of the law. This way, justice can still be served even when strict legal rules are too rigid. But in practice, it's not always easy. Intention is invisible. It has to be proven through draft negotiations and witnesses. Courts demand strong evidence, which makes rectification harder than it sounds in theory. Ambiguity also creates problems. Memories fade, words can be interpreted differently, and people may give conflicting versions of the same event. What seems morally clear may still be legally uncertain. Looking forward, technology like AI can help. AI can store negotiation records, analyze discussion, and highlight errors in contract. It cannot replace judges, but it can provide stronger evidence of intention. So in conclusion, this principle is powerful. It corrects the limits of common law and guides the courts towards fairness. Still, it must be applied carefully with clear proof and judicial discipline to balance equity with legal certainty. Okay, that's all for my presentation. Thank you for your attention.